Hi, my name is Michael Schnell. This is my wife, Rachel. I just wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about myself. So Rachel's going to kind of interview me, and we'll go from there. So what's the first question?
Okay, first question. How did you decide to go into the field you're in?
Well, one of the things that when I was growing up, I liked photography. I didn't know it till the day I went to high school, and wasn't into high school as much as when I went and took this first course. So I took a photography course, and I just fell in love with it. That's all I wanted to do. Next thing you know, I had a dark room in my house, and I just really got into it. So after I graduated from high school, I decided that photography was the way I was going to go. So I did some research, and my father did some research at the time, and we found that the best school around was a school called Ohio Institute of Photography. They had all the equipment, they were part of MIT and all of that, so it seemed like a good decision. Went to look at the school, and went to that for a number of years and got my associate's degree, and was very happy.
Okay, so what was your first job?
Well, when I got out of school, I decided that I wanted to go where the money was at. And at the time, it was mostly medical photography. Obviously, you could make a ton of money doing fashion and all of that, but to be able to get into that field, you really had to know somebody, and you really had to spend a number of years making your name for yourself. So I decided that medical photography would be a good place to go for a number of reasons. Number one, that it wouldn't just be one avenue of photography. So I would be able to do video, I would be able to do photography, I would be able to do documentation, darkroom stuff. It kind of involved everything, instead of just being a photographer or just being a darkroom person or what have you. So I did some research, and there was two places I wanted to go, the number one places to do it, where I would see the most, have the most funding to do what I wanted to do. So I came across two places. I wanted to do, of course, the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins. So I called both of them, and Johns Hopkins kind of got back to me first and said, yeah, we'd love to do an internship with you. And it worked out great because my uncle lived in Baltimore. So I moved out to Baltimore, and I did an internship for about 6 months, which rolled into 8 months. They stayed on for another couple months, and I really enjoyed it. Did a lot of videoing of surgeries, photography of specimens, photography of new operations as far as medical equipment. I was in the dark room. I was doing micrography, which is microscope photography. So I learned a lot of stuff, putting together a lot of stuff for doctors, for seminars, and things like that, and cutting edge of the medical field.
Okay, so where did you go from there?
After I got out of Johns Hopkins and I did my internship, I went back home, started applying for different jobs in the medical field, and there wasn't a lot out there at the time. So I started doing a little more freelance. So I started to call up advertising agencies. I was doing school pictures. I was doing product photography for advertising agencies, even weddings. And I did that for a couple of years, and kind of figured out what I liked, what I didn't like, what experience I had before. So that's where I went from there.
Okay. Then how did you get into graphic design aspect?
Well, what happened next was I did all this freelancing stuff. And I was at home, and I was young, and I didn't want to stay at my parents' house. I had a studio down in the basement. So I decided to move to Florida with a couple of friends and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. So I got down to Florida, and spent my first year there kind of meeting people. And I met a bunch of artists. I was bussing tables and doing whatever I had to do, and I met this artist group and became part of it. And these artists decided to say, you know what, Mike, we really like what you're doing. We've seen your stuff. Why don't you do a gallery? So now I'm like, wow, I'm going to do a gallery, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be an artist. And I had artist friends, and it seemed like the cool thing to do. And they were all successful. They were from Captiva Island. And so I poured everything I had into doing this gallery. And I was going to do a wildlife gallery based around stuff that was in Florida. Manatees was one of the things, and panther, Florida panther, and different snakes and different wildlife, trees, you name it. I was going through swamps and everything else. And at the end of the day, I did my gallery. I was very proud of it. And what I found out was you don't really make a lot of money being an artist unless you're the top artist, and that would take a number of years. So while it was a good experience, it kind of put me broke. I mean, I was buying all kinds of equipment, underwater cameras, anything that I could do that was going to be different from what I saw. Mm-hmm. So kind of learned that I didn't want to be a starving artist. So I went in, I got the next best thing. I said, well, I'm just going to go get a job on the beach. So I was down in Fort Myers Beach, and I absolutely enjoyed it. I was young then. I was probably around 23 to 25. And I worked as a maintenance guy on the beach. And my boss came in to me one day, and he says, hey, look, Michael, I've seen the work that you've done. We need a new brochure. Do you think you could help us? We need to update our brochure, pictures, all this kind of stuff. And I said, absolutely. So I went ahead and I did this brochure, and I was hanging off of buildings because I did high rises and all this kind of stuff to get unique shots of it. And they loved it. So I did all the photography for that, and then I said, wow, well, now I've got to be able to put the brochure together as well. So I started really getting into the graphic design aspect of what I saw around me, what was relevant, and starting into Photoshop and Illustrator. And at the time I was using Quark Express, which now is kind of like, Indeed is the program to use for that. So I really enjoyed it. And from there I said, you know what, I can do this for other people. So I had a friend that worked at the resort, and he ran a small area of the resort, and he did jet ski rental, and he would do parasailing. And I said, wow, So I told him I wanted to do a brochure for him. He said, great, I need some work done. I said, well, why don't we trade some stuff out? And I said, when I need a parasail, let me know. I have this idea. And he said, okay, what's your idea? And I said, well, I've got all these shots. These people can't afford to take helicopters out and do all this. This is before drones. So I got on his parasail thing. I said, look, I'll split the money with you. You do the gas, you do the parasail, and we're going to go and we're going to shoot all these resorts. So I was up parasailing with video equipment and photography equipment and having the time of my life. I was on rollerblades going down the beach with a camera to try to get steady cam because I couldn't afford that camera equipment at the time that you could do it. And so what I would do is I'd take all this stuff and edit it all up and bring it in and show the hotels and things, like, look at this, Mm-hmm. And of course, I was younger, I was willing to take a little bit less. And it worked out really well. So I did a lot of brochures there and got into all that kind of stuff. Took some of my work to the advertising companies that were local, and they liked my stuff, so I was doing freelance. So I did that for a couple of years. Okay. I worked with some guys that I knew at the advertising company who could kind of mentor me to graphic design aspect. Mm-hmm. And in turn I would kind of mentor them in the photography and how I would do that and why things were different and blah, 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 blah. And it was a good relationship with everybody to be mm-hmm. had. So that's kind of how I first got into graphic design.
Okay. So after that, then you started your own business?
Well, right before that, I got a call from, I was in Florida, and I got a call from the Zollman Center.
Yeah.
And when I got a call from them, I'm like, oh, wow, here's my medical photography. I can go back to this. But I had been doing so much graphic design. I had been doing so much brochure work that I really liked being able to do both. It kind of gave you a break from here, and then you were doing this, and then you could kind of pull this whole thing together, which was really something that was unique, not just handing it off. I wanted to do it all. So I told the Zollman Center, talked to Dr. Wally Zollman, and I said, look, I'm willing to go out there and run your photography department, but I really want to do something else. I did that at Johns Hopkins, and I just want to do a little bit more. And he said, well, he goes, to be honest with you, he said, we have a marketing position open too. And if you could work both those things, that would be great. So I said, okay, and I said, that would be wonderful. So off my way back to Indiana, and I was a little homesick at the time, so it was a good change for me. So I worked there for a couple of years, and I ran their photography department and 2 other photographers, pre and post-op surgery stuff, because they did plastic surgery. And I would do pre and post-op, and then 1 or 2 days a week I would go back to my home and work out of my home, and they didn't have the computer equipment at the time like I did, and do their brochure work and do their ads for the paper. And then at night we would do a lot of like seminars. So we came up with the fact that he was a big surgeon. I mean, the guy was amazing. And he did like newscasters. I mean, he was a marketing genius as well as a good surgeon. So we came up that at nights we would bring in these, people that worked in sports or on the network and stuff. And we would do the seminar and then invite other people over and videotape the whole thing. And then we would send the videotape out to people, and then other people would want to come and sit down. So I started up their video campaign and started a small studio in there, the best we could do at the time. And that was very successful. So I really loved it. I was doing photography, I was running a department, I was also doing marketing, advertising. I saw stuff in the paper, I liked that. And unfortunately, a couple years into it, Dr. Zollman got in some tax trouble. And next thing I know, my boss calls me, and she was HR, and says, Michael, you got 2 weeks. You got a bunch of vacation, you need to take that. And I said, well, what's going on? And they said, well, you probably won't have a job. They're auctioning off everything here for taxes. I said, really? I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I took my vacation and went back and did some freelance and stuff at the time, and tried to fill my space and look for a new job. And I ran into a guy that did printing, and I used him a long time. He was a good guy. He was a sales guy for a large print company in Indianapolis. And he says, Mike, I've seen your work. I know you're doing a lot of freelance now. Why don't we start a business? So that's where we started our business. And so we started this business. It was called the Technability Team. It was down on Mass Avenue, right downtown, before Mass Avenue was a cool place to go. And I absolutely loved it. But we were competing with all these big advertising companies, and he had a lot of sales, and that worked out well. I said, we've got to do something different. So we had a client that was looking for some different stuff to do, and they were looking at hiring us to do some videos for sexual harassment. And I said, why don't we do some CDs and do a training? And this is when CD-ROMs were real big and kiosks were real big. And I said, well, I think we can introduce some new stuff, and we can introduce a database to this, and we can track everybody's information, and then you can resell it. So we partnered up with these guys, and we did this whole thing, and really got into the multimedia. So what I liked about the multimedia was I was doing video, I was doing photography, I was doing graphics, and then I started to do programming. Now I can make all these things, my photographs talk and cut to video and cut to 2D, and then started doing motion graphics and things like that. And being able to track everything technology-wise, and that was a big deal back then. So we did very well with that. The city saw, or Indianapolis saw our multimedia training thing on sexual harassment that we did for this company. They said, wow, this is pretty cool. And they said, we have a project, we want to get into new technology, and we've got some funding. And I said, great. So we did a thing for them called Invitation to Indianapolis. And we did it on a kiosk base, and we also sent out CD-ROMs. So it was kind of promotional for the city. We did that, and we ended up winning a Telly Award. And I was very proud of that. I didn't even know what a Telly Award was at the time. And everything was going great. And then 9/11 happened. And even a little bit before that, where the banks crashed here in the United States. And funding just dried up. So these big companies that were all excited about putting extra money into advertising, all of a sudden were laying people off. And their budgets, they were just like this with their money, instead of trying new things and just trying to survive. So with all that happened, we just kind of went under. And I said, I've got to go my way, you've got to go your way, and maybe we can resurface at another time. So that's what happened with my business venture.
All right, so after that, what got you into product design today?
Well, I met one of my clients who was a longtime client. I used to do studio photography for him. So he was an inventor and owned a company that invented a lot of HVAC stuff. And he would come to me and I would do studio photography for stuff, and he would use that for promotional stuff. But now he was going to China, and China was a new thing. He was going to manufacture over in China. His name was Steve Peabody. He owned a company called CMI Engineering. And he came to me and he's like, I love what you're doing with your Illustrator stuff. And I was making it look three-dimensional in a two-dimensional format. And I was doing all these drawings for him, and he says, man, he goes, this is what I need to explain to my engineers over in China so they could get what I want to do. And I said, well, he'd have me draw and the guy was super ADD, so he would have me draw front view, side view, and then he'd change it all. And I'm like, this takes way too long. Well, when I had my company downtown, next door was an engineering company as well. And I'd watch all these engineers and they're drawing CAD work, and I'm like, just fascinated. I'm like, but 3D Studio Max kind of came out and started to be the forefront. And so I said, I got to learn this new program. And it was more based towards, instead of CAD work as far as engineering, it was based more towards explaining the graphic design and making more realism that I couldn't capture in Illustrator. So I worked with the engineer over there. I learned this new program, and I proposed it to Peabody, and he's like, wow. He goes, this is out of the box. And that's kind of where I knew that this new technology, based with my others, since it was a cutting edge, was going to get me to the next thing. So the next thing I know, I'm working for their company all the time, and they're sending me new stuff, and I'm designing stuff. And I'd always worked with him on manufacturing, always was interested in how things work and how things tick. So I had a pretty good mechanical mind as well as an art mind too. So it worked out really well. The relationship went on for years and years. In fact, I saw him last weekend. But so that took me into a new whole thing. So now Steve Peabody's going to China. He's like, okay, now I want you to start going to China with me. I said, well, I don't want to go to China. I've never been to China. He says, you need to go to China with me and help me with these engineers. You do all the photographs, and if you can work with them, I think we could be quite successful. And I said, hey, free trip to China, let's go check this thing out. I love, building something new. So that's what got me into product design. And been doing product design since 2000. and I love it because it's not only product design. I've got to work with people to do some of their advertising stuff, so it may be a trade show, or it may be their packaging, or they need a video for investors to show how things work before they build it, to make sure they can get the money for the prototyping. So it has, like multimedia, and like back with John Hopkins, I was doing a lot of different things with new technologies, and I've always been about that to further really kind of show a new way of communicating the message. So that's how I got into that.
Okay. So besides work, what do you like to do on your off time?
Well, when I have off time, because now I have a 3-year-old, so off time is a little bit different than it used to be. I love to travel. Obviously, that's how we met.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in China, I wouldn't have met my beautiful wife, or had my son, or any of that. So I love to travel. The other thing that we enjoy doing is a lot of kayaking and fishing.
Yeah.
And deep sea fishing has always been my passion, and you never did it till you got here.
Yeah.
But then when you got here and we did it, it certainly became your passion.
Yes.
And now she outfishes me pretty much all the time, and it gets to be kind of a competition. But we really like that, and we really like to travel and see new places. I've seen all over Asia, thanks to Rachel, and in the work that I do, accommodates that. But our next thing, I think, is going to be scuba diving, because we went to Cayman Islands and you really enjoyed snorkeling.
Yes.
So if I can get you, she's not real happy with, not real happy with the water, but she's learning, and you did a really good job down there, and you saw how exciting that was. So I'm hoping that's our next fun, but we got 3-year-olds, so we've got to figure that out. So I think it's going to be kayaking next again, and slowly get him into that.
Yeah.
And then maybe take him on some little tiny snorkeling trips, sort of like what we did with Caymans.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so where do you see yourself go for next colony?
I'm still working for Rising Product, and I really enjoy that. The problem is that I've got to be gone sometimes 4 months out of the year, and at a call's notice for a client. And with you and our family, it's not very convenient.
Yeah.
Before Aiden, and it's only going to get less convenient, obviously, because we're going to probably have baseball games, or who knows what he's going to get into. Could be soccer or whatever. So I'm kind of, my next stage is trying to find somewhere where I'm happily in my direction, instead of so much concentrating on other clients. Is more work and family.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for, and that's what you need as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for. I've already done the travel, and I've done all that kind of stuff, and it proved itself well for me.
Okay.
But I'm looking to kind of settle down on that, and I'm looking for a company that can utilize what I can do. I mean, right now, I'm always into what's the newest technology and how can that help get the message out there in a better way. Sometimes it's premature, sometimes, whatever, but trying to figure those things out. So as well as I do, when drones came out, I had to have a drone. And I've got to figure out, and oh wow, look at this, so another thing for my arsenal. 3D printers came out, I had to have a 3D printer, so figure out a way that we could pay for these with jobs, and now I'm 3D printing. And last month, or 2 months ago, I decided, for a client, and came up with a solution for them to do 3D scanning. So now my big thing now is doing 3D scanning and bringing it into my 3D software, and utilizing drones for landscape, and being able to model those things, and really try to mix all the different medias to give something new, something fresh, but it's going to communicate the idea better than anybody else is doing it. And if you don't keep on top of things, then you're irrelevant. And I've learned that through all my experience. I have a friend of mine doing VR stuff, Eric, and that's a real exciting technology, and I think everything's going towards there. So it's nice when everything can kind of come together, like your drone work, your video work, your 3D work can all go into that new medium that I think we're going to see a lot of is virtual reality, and even with your cell phones and things like that. And it doesn't have to necessarily be your goggles on, but that's the best experience. So I'm always looking at new technology and someone that could benefit from some of the experience that I have and be excited about looking at things in a different way. So that's where I'm kind of trying to find that fit right now.
Okay.
Of where to be and how to do things, and you know as well as anybody. So that's where I'm at.
All right.
All right?
Okay.
Well, thanks for giving me this time, and I got to get together and edit this all up for you. But that's kind of me in a nutshell. And my beautiful wife, she could tell you tons of things about herself. And but anyway, we've got a small pocket because my son is at my mother's house, and it's really quiet here, honey.
Yeah.
So we're going to enjoy that. I'm going to get to work. So thanks for taking the time to look at my video, and hope to hear from you guys soon. Thanks again.